welcome everyone for our session, Climate Crisis in the Arts, Replace the Waste. We're really excited to be here, and it's really exciting to see how this festival's come together. The organisers have done a great job. So we firstly want to acknowledge the land that we're on, the Kaurna land, and we want to acknowledge and pay our deep respects to the people that came before us and have been stewards of this land. And I hope that with what you learned today and the practices that you're already employing, that we can be good environmental stewards of the land as well and lead by example. You'll see here the Adelaide Festival is already leading the way in terms of looking after our environment with their events. So I hope you'll notice some of the little things that we're going to talk about today. So while we're in this space, I also just want to mention a few little housekeeping things. If you need to go to the bathroom between, just go down the corridor past Let Them Eat to the left there and you'll find the bathrooms. Obviously, we're practicing in a COVID-safe environment, so wear your mask when you can. Only take it off when you're with people that you know and trust and all that sort of stuff, and keep distance and be hygienic and clever. You'll notice that on the tables where you're sitting there, you'll see QR code. That actually has some access to some resources that we're going to talk about today. So if you want to look up more information afterwards, because we will mention a few handy things along the way, so you can look up information there. We encourage you, if you have burning questions as we go along, please do shout them out. There is a microphone just underneath this tree here, so you can come to the microphone, or if you've got a booming voice, feel free to boom at us and we'll paraphrase because we are recording. But there will also be questions 15 minutes to the end. So I just wanted to make some introductions. So Jessica Wundke is here with me today. She works at Green Industries SA. She works across policy areas covering food, organic waste, commercial waste and recycling, packaging and events.
Well, thanks, Sarah. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and pay respects to the elders past, present and future.
So Jess, obviously you've got quite a broad portfolio of things that you're looking after. Is there anything in particular that you're passionate about at the moment?
Definitely maximising the use of our resources and also making it really easy to do the right thing. So putting systems in place, things like food waste goes in your green bin, whether that's at home, at work or at an event like this. And and I guess that's where our work's kind of crossed over or aligned, Sarah. So Sarah and I first met when she was working at City of Adelaide on their Sustainable Events Guide. This was back in 2018, I think, Sarah. And and since then I know you've explored sustainable design consulting, and you're currently working at KeySab on waste education. So we're continuing to align our areas of work, particularly in regards to encouraging more sustainable actions and work within the circular economy.
Yeah, and we're obviously here at an event, and you would notice that events are really important spaces, and particularly the arts, as we just heard if you were able to attend the first few sessions, that exploring the arts as a creative way to get these important messages across is really impactful. Events offer this really amazing space where we can communicate with each other in diverse ways. They're really an opportunity to connect and grow, but they also reflect things in our societies as well. So obviously we have a wasty background, so you'll see that you have 3 bins that are in the traffic light colours, because that reflects what you have at home. So all these things have these connectivities in them, and that's why events is such an amazing space. We want to talk about how events can be run more sustainably. So I just want to pose that question to you, Jess. It's quite a loaded question. It's probably a massive one, but I don't know whether there's a few key points that you can narrow it down to if we were to ask that question.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned, events are amazing, and we all come to events to experience something new, whether that be a music event, a discussion such as this, even a conference. That's an event. We all come to learn something and engage with something. So Events do provide a really fantastic platform to expand on that and to put more sustainable practices in place. And today this session we are really focusing on waste, and we've got the waste guidelines on various tables, and if you do want some more, they'll be around. So yes. So this is the new one. It was released yesterday. It's our new guidelines for making a difference. And we felt it was really important to put out some guidelines for events because around waste minimisation and management, because waste is such a really visible aspect at an event. When we're at an event, there's all different types of experiences, and settings add to that. We're in this amazing gardens today, Pioneer Women's Memorial Gardens, and we've got amazing weather, but we don't want things to detract from the event. And because waste is such a visible aspect of it, people are increasingly noticing if you've got compostable items and things like that, but then you don't have the recovery systems for that, that can detract from an event, litter at an event, for instance. So it is a really visible part of an event. So some things that you can do to improve waste management at an event include, look at minimising waste in the first place. That's a really critical thing. And reduce unnecessary items. So if you can avoid flyers, if you can avoid single-use serviceware where possible, go for reuse if you can. Really look, and so this guide is designed as really practical tips of how you can go about some key things to look at in the first place. The second thing that we're really promoting is to include an organic waste stream. So we've got that in place here, and Let Them Eat and Adelaide Festival have been really great with all the serviceware provided by Let Them Eat being fully compostable. It's really critical where you don't have an option to rinse containers that you do at home. Make sure you can use compostable ware in an event so you can recover those resources that are used.
And I might just tap in
there,
and I'm sure you already know, but I just like to clarify things. Jess just mentioned rinsing containers, and that's in relation to the recycling stream. I want to throw it to you because I want this to be interactive. Why are we rinsing our recyclable containers? Why does it matter? So effectively what happens to whatever goes in your yellow bin, it goes to a MRF, a material recovering facility, and they have to sort all those things out because we're lucky in Australia that we just chuck plastic and paper and glass all in the one bin. Amazing. Most other countries, or some other countries, there's 22 different streams you've got to separate it out to, so we're really, really lucky to have that. But if you want to recycle, recycling is the whole process, which means you put it in the right bin and then it gets made into something else, and then that something else you use again, right? To make something good enough again to be reused, it's got to be relatively good quality in the first instance. So that's why that rinsing steps is really important, and that's why you'll see at events you generally won't have a commingled recycling bin because you don't have that opportunity to rinse. So I just wanted to clarify that, and hopefully that explains the why.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jess.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, because the event bins here are 10 cents, and that's one of the differences, I think, from your household streams, because we don't have that option to rinse servingware, but also that there's different streams of material that are generated at events. We don't have the cans, we don't have things like that you would generate at home, so therefore make the systems as simple as they can for the people that are using it. So compostable ware, really supports that, and putting in place an organics recycling stream.
Yeah, and the compostable ware, you've got food in there, and it doesn't matter because food and the compostable stuff is all fine for the compost that it's going to make out of it. Whereas if you have recyclables, you're not going to be able to clean that food out and separate it. And the 10 cent, the reason we collect that is obviously it has a value, which is great, but it's generally a liquid in there, so you get a relatively clean stream, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so the guide has 5 key tips, and you'll notice that including an organics recycling stream is really critical. It's listed as a second tip. And and it's part of the comprehensive waste management system for events. Yeah, and clear and effective signage as well. That's so critical, as well as having the systems in place, make them as easy as possible to use. So yeah, clear signage is part of that, and measure measure the waste streams at your event. There's always an option to improve, and and measurement and recording that as part of your event actions, a really key part of that.
Yeah, and measurement seems a bit tedious and nobody likes it. Well, I certainly don't like a spreadsheet, but I don't know whether you do, but measurement is really important, because how do you know you've made an impact and had an outcome unless you've measured it in some way? So that's a really tangible one. Plus also, if you are people running events, if you can measure it and say, this year we diverted X, Y and Z, we'd actually saved us this much money, you're more likely to get a grant and some support out of that as well. So that's a nice little kicker. So single-use plastics are a pretty hot topic at the moment. Hands up if you know what happened on the 1st of March this year. Yeah, what happened? Hooray! Okay, so phase 2 of the single-use plastics ban came into place. So phase 1 was last March. Does anyone know what that included? Straws, cutlery, stirrers. Brilliant.
Yep.
So this phase, what was it, Jess?
It was expanded polystyrene, cups, bowls, plates, and oxo-degradable plastics.
Yeah, so oxo-degradable we're going to go into in a little bit more, but I mean, it's such a contentious topic, single-use plastics, and you would have heard before that the UN has just announced a treaty on plastic pollution. So I think it's like 173 countries signed that treaty. Thankfully, Australia was one of them. So it's addressing the full life cycle of plastic, including production, design, disposal, and they're going to develop the implementation of that over the next few years. So it's really interesting to see that there's this global movement, but there is also a lot happening in South Australia. Hooray, kudos, we were the first to do the container deposit scheme, and we were one of the first to do the shopping bag ban as well. But what else is happening in South Australia, Jess?
Yeah, so South Australia was also the first to put in place single-use plastics legislation. So I think that really builds on the history that we have of container deposit legislation and also plastic bag bans. We did that many years ago, and I think it's something that South Australians are really proud of. So they've really South Australians have really embraced this next step in terms of single-use plastics. And that came through, Green Industries SA, we released our discussion paper back in 2019 asking the community, what does South Australia need to take action in banning single-use plastics? And the response to that was really overwhelming. So that's what led into overwhelming support. So that's what led into the first stage as single-use plastics legislation. We've had the first stage of the ban, which was the straws, cutlery, drink stirrers. Now we've got the second stage in terms of expanded polystyrene and oxo-degradable plastics. And to support these bans, we've also provided resources. So we've got the Replace the Waste website and also Plastic Free SA program. So that's they've both been developed to help businesses in the community implement these changes. And now we're looking at what's in the future. So prior to the state government entering the caretaker period, which we're currently in ahead of the election next weekend, a discussion paper was released, so that was seeking feedback on what the next stage of items are. So currently going through that, and very excited to see what those next steps are.
Yeah, so if you have ideas, it's your opportunity to have your say. Your voice means a lot in these conversations, and it's going to affect legislation, which is pretty cool. I know we're probably going to go into single-use plastics a little bit more, but I just want to pick up on that oxo-degradable. So can you step us through how that's different?
Yeah, so oxo-degradable, so the ban extends from not only supply of oxo-degradable, but also the manufacture of it in South Australia. And so oxo-degradable plastics have an additive in them that just breaks it down. So if it's litter, not only does it litter from a traditional plastics point of view, but it breaks into smaller pieces, which just makes it really much harder to recover. So this is and just causes small bits of plastics in more spots. So I think that's a really exciting part of the ban that's come into place.
Yeah, and to help people understand that, I know when we go out to community and we work with a lot of kids and businesses to explain the difference, we try to use different terminology. So for example, when we talk about microplastics, and this is oxo-degradable sorts of things, we say that it breaks up, whereas composting breaks down. Down is back into the earth where it belongs because it was made out of natural materials. Breaking up is, obviously the opposite. So if you see oxo-degradable, that just means that oxo is that additive chemical that breaks it up. There's also terminology that uses the swear word biodegradable, which actually isn't well defined at all. I could use biodegradable to talk about pretty much anything I wanted to. That's why I call it a swear word. But there's often degradable used as well, and they're very different to compostable. So compostable means it was made out of a natural material, break back down, and won't have any toxic residue. And in Australia, we have some really great composters. South Australia in particular, we have two massive ones which are phenomenal. And they do, to the Australian standard, they do an ecotoxicity test to check in with the worms. And they're like, hey worms, are you happy with this soil? Yep, sweet, you're good. That means it's good soil, because that soil goes to all our farmers and grows the produce that we get to consume. So we don't want any of that stuff in it. So that's why you need to be really mindful of those terms and the swear words in them, because it's a cycle. We live and breathe that, and I mean there's now a recognised plastic cycle because it's in our atmosphere. We're ingesting so much of it in our food, in our water. It's something to be really mindful of, and we're consumers, so we have a choice as to whether we engage with this stuff. So sorry, tangent.
No, not a tangent at all. And in the guide there is a whole section on what to look for in terms of compostable packaging. So really look for the Australian standards, because as Sarah mentioned, that does include the worm toxicity test. And there's two Australian standards around bioplastics. So one is AS4736, which is for commercial composting. So items that really need that heat to break down, and that heat's only thanks Sarah. That heat's only achieved in a commercial composting environment. It gets to above 55 degrees, breaks down pathogens, but also enables the breakdown of this bioplastic that's certified 4736. And there's also 5810, which is the other logo to look for, and those materials can go in either your home composting or in a commercial setting as well. So just make sure that you're using Australian certified, because it's currently the highest certification in Australia that's available.
Yeah. And I don't know whether many of you are aware that we recently had a fruit fly outbreak in South Australia, and it's really cool that commercial composting system was actually able to kill the larvae as well. So our composters do an amazing job, and we need to support them, because if we're putting the wrong thing in the bin, they can't really sift that out, and then we end up dealing with that. Don't think it's just a way. There is no way. It's really...
to add on to that, thanks Sarah, just really, South Australia is so fortunate. We've got really advanced composting systems, and so this enables us to put really simplified systems in at events and to manage those compostable materials. When over 10 years ago now, when we Zero Waste at the time did major food waste pilot, so this was before food waste got rolled out over the whole of Metro Adelaide, the composters flipped their systems around so that any major contaminants, instead of having all the contaminant removal at the start of the process, because it's really hard to identify which are traditional plastics and which are compostable plastics, particularly when you're dealing with them at scale. So they flipped the composting system around so that any major contaminants are removed at the beginning, then put into windrows, go through the long composting process, and now we have really advanced contaminant removal processes at the end now, which means that it gives a chance for all these compostable materials to actually break down, and they're not accidentally pulled out at the beginning.
Yeah, and you might have noticed, we've said it a few times, that you can actually get some really great compostable materials, but as just mentioned, a lot of them are bioplastics, which are made out of, mostly PLA, polylactic acid, and a lot of that comes from cornstarch. But it's really hard to tell the difference. Does anyone know how to tell the difference when you're looking at these materials? Like, this one's a plastic up. No, yeah, it's really hard. And I mean, I work with it every day and I still struggle. And when it's not labelled well, it's exceptionally challenging still. So if it's labelled well, generally if you look on the bottom of a cup or a plastic thing, you know it's got that chasing arrow that I can't stand. So plastics history, once upon a time the chasing arrow meant recycling, and then the plastics industry kind of got into trouble because people were saying, oh, plastics were great and we want to use them for lots of things and it's enabled lots of things, and I'm not saying plastic hasn't advanced us, but the plastics industry was copping a bit of environmental movement. They're like, oh, we'll just use that chasing arrow and put our number in there so we know what kind of plastic it is, and it makes it look better. Anywho, tangent. Don't worry about the chasing arrow. Look for what it says inside there. So if it is polylactic acid, which is the cornstarch one, which is totally compostable, it'll say PLA. If you just remember PLA, plants, compostable, sweet. That's probably the easiest thing I could say.
Yeah, and look for those two logos. So yeah, increasingly, what we call the seedling logo, which is on 4736, and the compostable compost bin sort of logo, which is 5810. But also, if you do need help, look on replacethewaste.sa.gov.au. There's a whole host of resources on there to help with alternative products and which compostable products there are. And and also Plastic Free SA can also help businesses as well for searching out alternative items. We've got a question.
Yep. Yeah. No, so the question was, why not write just cornstarch on it, because it's natural and that would help everyone understand it rather than having to remember a million numbers and codes for things. Jess, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, so that's why we're really promoting, I guess, the seedling logo, to look out for that, and you'll see that on some of the signage around. I've noticed it's on the green bins out here, so yeah, the numbers, I guess, are important for when you're purchasing it, but yes, look, the visual of having the seedling logo on the bins as well as on the packaging, that just links it together directly. So it's great.
And it's a great point, because when you have the information, you know what to do, right? But having that information is a challenge. But you have to think about it from a marketer's perspective. They're there to sell you stuff. And you'll all be familiar that there's a lot of greenwash. And lots of companies are like, this is plant-based, this is blah, 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 blah. I could say whatever I want. Like I said, I can throw around the word biodegradable and you'll think it's great, but it's not. Things will break up. The challenge with this is there is no regulation around that wording. If you happen to be good at writing letters, please report it to the ACCC, because they actually have a greenwashing legislation around it. But do that, but also know that APCO, the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, has on their priority list that yes, we will try and standardise a regulated labelling system to make it easier. But I think that's number 9 out of 12 of their priorities. So it might be a little while.
So APCO, Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, they've released compostable packaging guidelines, and a logo for composting is similar to the ARL logo, which you might have seen increasingly on packaging, telling you which bin to put it in at home. Yeah, they're also looking at one for a compost situation as well.
Yep. Question.
Firstly, a comment. The reason why I wash my plastic containers is because I reuse them and reuse them and reuse them, and they only get put in recycling when they're broken.
Fantastic.
Which is the first, one of the first steps. I'm very worried about this.
So are we.
What are we doing with all these masks, the rats? I work in health. I have to do a rat every morning before I go to work. I have to wear masks at work and goggles, but the goggles are just mine. I don't have to throw them away, but you're not supposed to wear these for more than 4 hours, and they don't fit anywhere. And I tried to wash one, soak it to see whether it, sort of fell apart. Didn't. So that's one question. The other question is, what about cellophane? So much is wrapped in cellophane. Get flowers, they're wrapped in cellophane. Cellophane just falls apart when it's old. Is it recyclable? What are we supposed to do with it?
Excellent questions. Thank you. Oh, kudos. Do you want to address some of those first, Jess?
Yep, happy to. Yeah, so in terms of masks, we've had public health measures in for a couple of years now, keeping going. It's single use is recognised as a continual issue, but they are addressing the spread of coronavirus. So at the moment they're a necessary waste stream. But certainly accept that that's something that we are having to manage. And at the moment, single use items just can't be recycled. So
Sorry, that's just a really sad answer. I just was holding this up because I love that you said you're reusing stuff. So I don't know whether many of you are familiar with the waste hierarchy. So this is like the ideal of how we would manage our materials. And I would actually encourage you to think about the words that we use, because like we were talking about before, there is no such thing as waste in nature. So waste is actually a verb, not a noun. You choose whether you waste something. So you have personal agency to do something about this, which is awesome. But also we want to look at this hierarchy in terms of prioritising our choices. So you'll see, you might be able to see that avoid and reduce is right up the top there. That's the one that we should be doing the most. Reusing after that, composting, then recycling. Because remember, recycling, it's going through the whole process. It's got to be sorted, it's got to be pulverised and granulated, then it's going to go mailed into something else. It's quite energy intensive. So that's what we should be aiming for.
That waste hierarchy differs slightly from the waste hierarchy that sits in South Australia's waste strategy, and it's been adapted for event settings within South Australia. So you will notice that there is a slight difference between the waste strategy, and that just needs to account for the different setting at an event. So that's why you'll see compost separated out from recycling, where it usually sits in under.
So at events, obviously there's a lot of single use, which is really, really challenging. So servingware is generally single use, and a lot of it just used to be plastic, but thankfully there's a lot of compostables now. So how can events minimise the single use sort of things?
Reduce where possible. And that might be as simple as just, as I got a coffee this morning, the lids weren't automatically provided when you got a coffee. Straws are not automatically provided. So, if reusable serviceware isn't an option at the event, then really look at ways that you can still minimise it, even if you are using single use. And just recognising that, although it's a compostable item, there's still resources that have been put into that. So make sure that the recovery systems are aligned with the serviceware that you're using. So if you are using compostable ware, make sure that there's an organic bin to recover that, because if it's ending up in landfill, then there's no, it doesn't keep circulating around.
So just to clarify that as well, so we talked about what happens to the compostable materials. So they basically get ground down, they get put into windrows, it just gets just the right amount of air and just the right amount of water to make beautiful compost. So I don't know whether many of you are gardeners. Compost is this really nutrient-rich, beautiful thing, right? And that's basically one of the providers of life. That's an aerobic environment. Landfill is anaerobic. So if we don't have those bins and all our compostables end up in landfill, it just putresces, and as it does that, it creates methane. So you're shooting yourself in the foot. So that's why it's really important to have the right bins to put stuff in, because otherwise you're not getting the outcome that you thought you would. if anything, you're actually getting a more negative outcome. So that's why it's really important.
I think it depends on which landfill, but yes, no, I agree.
Yeah.
You're just not recovering those resources. So just make sure that the recovery systems in place are suited to the materials that you're using.
Yeah.
And again, signage, it's so important to have clear signage. And if you can promote at the point of sale where your serviceware goes, that just provides another opportunity for that engagement and education for people using the systems.
Yeah, and that's really important to just have these conversations in the first instance. Like, do you know that when you come to Adelaide Festival, all the things that they're doing, are you aware when you come into the space, I've noticed these bins, oh cool, so I know what to do later. Or when you're, choosing which muffin you want to buy, you know that, the wrap goes here, I already know what to do. So you're making it a nice experience. It's not that experience of getting to the bins and being like, oh, I feel guilty, I don't know what to do. Like, if you make it a nice experience by thinking about these things and anticipating people's needs, I mean, that's the nature of events and hospitality, isn't it? Anticipating people's needs so you can make a nice experience. So thinking about that with your events is a really good thing as well. And we've already talked about how recovery systems are different at events, because obviously we don't have the clean recyclable streams here.
But there are similarities.
Yes.
Yeah, which probably the yellow bin's the biggest difference at events, just having that as a 10 cent. But back of house, you probably incorporate a commingled. But there are consistencies. And I think that by having the green bins in place, it just adds to that education around, wooden cutlery, your compostable straws, they go in your green bin, and it doesn't matter whether you're at home, whether you're at an event, or whether, you put that in your workplace compost stream.
Yep. So obviously this event tells you that everyone is concerned about the environment. I just wanted to pause and take a moment to think about why. Like, there's a million reasons why, and everyone's perspective will be different. But go back to the very basics of it. What does the environment give us? Shout it out, don't be shy. What are we actually getting from the environment, the natural environment? Air, fantastic. We kind of all need that, don't we? What else? Food, water, shelter, all the resources that we interact with every day. Kind of important. It's life. It's life-giving. And we have to remember that we are animals. We are part of that natural system. Yes, our society might have removed us and disconnected us to a certain extent, but remember, you have agency over your own life. You can choose whether that's something that you engage with or not. So I really want you to remember that your choices can make a big difference, and what you engage with makes a big difference as well. And how you interact with these events makes a big difference. Like, I remember when we were doing these guidelines in 2017-18, which seems like ages ago now. We were going to events, and I was asking the people that were there and randoms who just rocked up on their bike, and then some of the people behind the scenes, what are we doing about this? And the conversation wasn't really there, and people weren't really clicking. And then, I don't know, the single-use plastics thing came, and COVID kind of hit, and it all sort of got turned on its head. And now we're thinking about these things, and people are asking about it. So that's why events are changing. You would have seen those changes. So don't ever be afraid to use your voice and ask these questions, because we all have to live with this. So it does make a big, big difference. Yeah. So Jess, I just wanted to ask, you would have seen a lot of events changing their things. So have you got some good examples you want to share?
Yeah, definitely. Just to go back onto your point just before, I totally agree that things are changing, and just, having this whole day event here today is one really fantastic example of that. And and I think events and festivals are so much more engaged, and realising that they need to report on that, to measure that. And Rachel mentioned this morning, in her opening address, just the fact that Adelaide Festival are measuring because they want to be able to monitor that. And so Green Industries is also supporting that. We've got Ollie and Savvy here today. They're working with Festivals Adelaide, to help festivals put benchmarks across a whole range of measures, not just waste being one aspect, but also looking at energy use and a whole raft of other things. So there's definitely the demand, and definitely progressing that. In terms of fantastic examples of waste management at events, I think it's increasing, and obviously today is one example. All through the week, Writers' Week, have had these systems in place, Let Them Eat, providing compostable ware to match those systems, and actually this event is the first plastic-free SA champion, so that means that they've gone through the whole plastic-free SA certification for champion process, and it's the first sort of pop-up event that's happened for that. So Plastic Free SA have been working with individual businesses and across precincts to award championship status to those that are really taking that commitment on and transitioning over and above the single-use plastics. So well done, Adelaide Festival. And it's not just this site, they've got systems in at many of their venues. WOMAD is obviously a really fantastic example. It's a closed event, and the fact that they can use reusable cups for their bars and things like that, I think that's just a really great. And also the commitment that WOMAD have had to measuring. Again, we're going back to this measuring so that you can manage it. Over quite a number of years has been fantastic. And in terms of venues, we've got Adelaide Convention Centre really moving on, putting in systems in place and using reusable options. And a shout out to, I think, local government, not only their own events, but putting requirements in for stall holders at council-sponsored events has been really fast moving, I think, as you probably have seen since your time at
and it's not just like, I know we're obviously wasties, so we're talking about that a lot, but it's not just that element. There's a million things to sustainability. I mean, just as life is complex. Like when we did the City of Adelaide Sustainable Event Guidelines, we actually looked at a few key areas. So if you happen to want to Google City of Adelaide Sustainable Events, you'll find that there's actions under waste, water, energy, transport, marketing and measurement. So there's a million different things that you can do at an event. Don't ever think that, I can't do that bit. Find another one and do that. It doesn't have to be everything all at once, just as behaviour change is very slow. You choose one thing and you go, I'm going to try that. Maybe it's for Plastic Free July this year, you go, I'm going to go out without plastic water or something. You choose one thing, and then when you're solid at that, then you're like, sweet, I'm going to go on to the next thing. All these things are gradual and they take time, but then you look back at it and go, God, I've come a really long way and I'm a little bit pleased with myself. And, it just eventuates. It's practicing good habits, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. But there's a lot of events that are doing some really great stuff, and obviously we're in Mad March at the moment, so I'd really ask you to be mindful and have a look around at events and see what they're doing. And if you see something that could be done better, curiously ask the question. We're all in it together. We want to support each other. We don't want to accuse anyone, and it's often hard to tell what's going on behind the scenes. So curiously ask the question, I noticed that this is happening and I wondered why X, Y and Z couldn't be utilised, or did you know that this is possible? Would that be an option for next year, Having these conversations, planting some seeds, that's what gets things going. It creates momentum. And I mean, there's some really great case studies too.
Yeah, there's lots, And I just wanted to acknowledge that some events, it is more tricky where it is an open event like this, Adelaide Fringe venues, where I guess people were bringing other items in, so that's why we still do maintain a landfill waste stream, because that's really important. And the size of events like Gluttony and the Garden of Unearthly Delights, they've got fantastic systems in place, and they, they're a little bit more open events. So it's challenging. I'm sure we've got lots of good examples that others in the audience might.
Does anyone have an example that they want to share of an event they've experienced that they thought, they've got their sustainability credentials down pat? I mean, it's a very challenging space. And I mean, South Australia is not the only place that's doing it. There's some really great examples all across the world. Tassie's got some really good ones as well, and what they're doing in the UK with Julie's Bicycle is pretty cool. Like there's a million things you can do. There's some events that only have composting toilets, for example. Lots of people love them, lots of people hate them. Sometimes it's trial and error with your community and your audience as well. There's always things that you can test out. So, going to that, there are a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
So, especially at the moment, we've noticed that lots of people are a little bit afraid of testing or trialing or delving into the world of reusables because of the hygiene concerns around COVID. So I just wanted to touch on that one.
Yeah, look, I think it's been understandable, you know, and not just at events, but, you know, when you're going to cafes and restaurants, that there has been, some reluctance in some cases to use BYO. But I think that's changing as, you know, as all COVID measures are changing. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier, but just, you know, we certainly appreciate that it's a consideration. So, but there are options for reuse where there is only that single sort of handling transaction. So, you know, a cup over a bar, that's the same regardless of if you're using a single use or a reusable option. So yeah, and Plastic Free SA, I know on their website have a lot of really good tips on how you might be able to manage that or work into reusable or BYO options into your event or your workplace. Yeah.
They've got a video if you're a barista or are friends with your barista. It shows you how to do contactless coffee, I guess, for want of a better way of explaining it. And Plastic Free SA has said that over 125 scientists from 19 countries have signed a statement assuring retailers and consumers that reusables are safe during COVID. So it's just practicing good hygiene. Whether I touch your single-use cup or touch your reusable cup, I'm still touching your cup. So you're still practicing good hygiene, then it's still safe. So I encourage you to think critically and embrace the possibilities, because that's, again, one of those things that you have agency over. I should actually ask the audience, has anyone seen any of those COVID challenges or with BYOs addressed differently? Because I know there's a lot of supermarkets, for example, that got rid of their self-serve bulk buy things because they were afraid about that. I still went and used my jars everywhere. People looked at me strangely, but I was like, it's my jar. You know, like, you can still do it. Yeah. Anyway, there's probably a million options there. So, information-wise, what's out there that we can use?
Yeah, well, obviously, Green Industries SA's events and venues, tips and guidelines for better practice. So hard copies are available here. Please take one if you would like to use it. Otherwise it will be available on the Green Industries SA website and also on the Replace the Waste website, along with some tools that might be useful to implement those actions. Replace the Waste is a really fantastic resource on alternative options to single-use items, not only those that are banned currently under the first and second stage bans, but also if you are looking to go further. And Plastic Free SA, again, please, if you're a business or an event that needs some additional support, please reach out to Plastic Free SA. So, those are available. Obviously, City of Adelaide Council guidelines, and there are also some tips, on a lot of other resources. Again, our guide is specific for the SA context, just because it is slightly unique, particularly because, you know, we're so fortunate to have the composting sector as advanced as it is, so that just means that we can really simplify the systems, and just enable easy use and reduce contamination of the systems by having them simplified.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on that point that you made about South Australia being in a unique position, because lots of people got afraid when Catalyst had an expose of recycling not being recycled. Every state and territory is different, and our infrastructure and what we are capable of is different. And that's why you might know that my friend lives in this council over here and I live in this council over here, and they say that they can recycle this in this bin, but I can't do it over here. It's different because it's going to a different facility who then has different equipment, so then their capabilities are different. South Australia is really cool in that our landfill levy, actually the funds go back into the industry. So when the China sword dilemma hit, we were like, nah, we're sitting pretty, because we were already invested here. We were already managing it here. So things are still getting recycled, still getting composted. South Australia is doing a great job. So just remember, when you hear that hype in the media, think about media critically. It's not necessarily the case. So I just wanted to point that out. And also, there are amazing resources. Like I said, there's that scan code on your table to help you with some resources, and you'll be inundated, but chip through it bit by bit and it'll all make sense. How I was saying about the City of Adelaide's sustainable event guidelines, they included carbon and energy and all the rest of that as well, but they also had a whole heap of templates and tips. So I remember when we wrote, there's an industry event checklist. They're all one pages, they're real basic, and then we did a community event list as well. And there's elements like, we did a waste management guide specifically, and that included things like how to contract a waste service people, what questions to ask, what's suitable for you, how to monitor and report and measure. So there's 1,000,001 things, so you can just go and download the bits that apply to you and utilise those. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can just, like I said, chip away at it. So I just wanted to ask if anyone has any other questions, because I'm sure there's more. There's a lot of challenges around being able to tell the difference with things and what to put where. And at these events, we were just talking to some of the producers before about how there are companies who are doing amazing stuff, especially managing the waste here, and they actually sort through the bins as well. And I mean, when I was helping with the New Year's Eve event, we actually paid people to sort through all the materials because we wanted to know what bin got this level of contamination and why. And it's not a fun job. And, you know, when I do waste audits, I separate the material into 52 different streams. Can you imagine that? It's great labour. You get good guns. But it's really interesting because you think, so why did these people put it into this bin? What's the reasoning behind that? And when you can understand that, then you can bring the systems and the convenience to it. So I just want to point that out, that it's important to think about.
And that's why we have whichbin.com.au.
Yes, if you don't know,
.gov.au,
it's a great resource.
Which bin? That's the question we asked.
And the Which Bin website, I'm sorry, I'm going to come to your question, is a really cool one because you can put in your council area, because remember how I was saying council areas are different, right? So you can just go, I live in Salisbury and I want to know what to do with this weird thing. So you put in, I live in Salisbury, my weird thing, and it'll tell you what to do in your area. And if your friend looks up weird thing in Marion, it'll tell them what to do in Marion. So that's useful. Question, please.
Hi, my name's Helen and I live in the Port Noarlunga area. I help to run a music festival every year for the community. Great. And we run it over 3 days, and we were lucky enough to run it during COVID as well last year. It's from a council grant, so we have been trying to go paperless. I'm trying not to give out too many leaflets. We have recycle bins, etc., and it's run throughout the whole town. But with your sustainability advisor here, how would I get in contact with that person for running our festival? We do have a council person who can advise us about environmental issues, but just things like a digital app that would save so much in terms of a program. They have one up at Broadbeach every year, but I did check out the prices and it's like $30,000 at least. But how much paper would that save? I wouldn't have to hand out programs all the time. So I just wondered if you had any ideas, I'd be grateful.
Yeah. Jess, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. So in terms of support, I think for a digital app, you know, maybe for your size event, maybe, you know, that's not achievable at this stage, just given the costs and things like that. But, you know, maybe you can have big posters, you know, like we've got here today and things like that. But, you know, we certainly recognise that in some cases, you know, you might need a flyer and things like that, and then just provide the systems, to support that as well, to recover those or to reuse them. Or you won't be able to reuse them if they're changing at each event, but to recover those flyers as well. But more than welcome to get in touch with me, and Helen, I will I'll come and meet you after to give you my contact details.
And there are also a lot of consultants in Adelaide that can help with this sort of stuff, and I'm going to spruik that because we work with event organisers and business and the community as well. We can come in from the beginning and help you design the systems and then monitor it and measure it at the end as well, and then we can figure out how to go about it. So don't feel like there's not help. There is actually quite a lot of help, and like I said, Adelaide's kicking some goals. There are a lot of people really engaged with this, so if you just tap out and get into some networks, you'll find that there is a lot of support.
And work with your waste contractor as well. So most events, will require an external collection. There's plenty of event suppliers. One is Adelaide Green Clean, who's here today. And there's some tips in the toolkit in terms of what to ask your waste contractor. What systems to request, and also conditions or suggested terms for stall holders as well to match those systems, which are available on the toolkit, which is on the Replace the Waste website.
Yeah. And one thing I would say when you're planning events and doing those things that Jess just mentioned is think about it from the get-go and engage with everyone that's coming or being or has a stake in your event, I suppose, because the earlier you start those conversations, the more you get them thinking about it as well, and then you're all on the same journey together, and you don't get to the day and be like, oh, Bob, why did you bring those cups? Everyone's already informed and you know what you're aiming for, and then you can tease out along the way, oh, we have a problem with those spoons, let's look at it now so it's not a dilemma on the day. So it's a smoother experience for everyone, but also everyone knows what they're responsible for as well. So if you all of a sudden say to your waste contractor, oh, but I assumed that it was going here. If you haven't specified that you want, I don't know, whatever going to a particular composter, for example, it might not go there. So it's really important to have that early engagement. It's the same with anything. Design, when you paint something, it's not the painting that's the hard part, it's the sanding the walls in the first instance. The prep takes ages, but geez, it gets you a better result. Think about it in that way. Like, it's really important to do those build-up steps. It's the same with anything. It's tedious when you're building up your muscle mass or you're training for something, but gosh, when you get to the end of it, it's worthwhile because you've got a stable, solid foundation. Yeah. Okay, so I hope you realise that you do have some agency because, like I said, waste is a verb. You get to choose whether you do it, and we choose lots of things every day, and you can make conscious choices. And please do be gentle with yourselves though, because I know today is a day about climate crisis, and it brings that tension and some alarm bells and a bit of stress, but don't let that lead you to apathy, because we have a lot of choice and there is a lot of positive change that we can make, and like we've shown, there's a lot of help there as well. There's a lot of cause for positivity, so know that you can do this in your own time, you can do it at your own pace, you can chip away at bits and pieces, and know that your voice and what you choose to do does make a difference. I think most causes are always a groundswell that started with one passionate person or a group of, proactive individuals. That's how change happens. And it might be change in a broader cultural context, or it might just be change in your own household. Like, that's cool too. It's got to start somewhere, and maybe that snowball will then end up being a snowball for your community or your street or, whole of Adelaide.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and in an event setting, I think we're already reaching that. People are attending events and they're expecting these systems to be in place. They're expecting the compostable serviceware, and they're starting to ask these questions. So, so Sarah, I think that change, certainly is progressing, and and that's amazing and fantastic. And so, so the guide's meant to be a practical guide just to help you put those really key steps in. How do you put these sort of services in for better management?
Yeah, so when we were talking about monitoring it, researching and understanding it is key. And I know you all said, how do you tell the difference between plastics? It's really hard. So part of the journey is educating ourselves as well. We are so inundated with information now. We have access to information at the tip of our fingers most of the time. So it's easy and hard in probably equal measure, because it's hard to sift out what is kind of fake news and what's real. And how I was explaining the difference between biodegradable and compostable, like, you know, you get inundated with this stuff and there is a lot of corporations doing a bit of greenwash now, but if you just take the time to really think about it critically and educate yourself, once you know the how and the why, the rest comes easily. So when we go into schools and we teach education community, we always make sure that we say, this is why this happens and this is the process. It's the whole like teach a man to fish idea. You don't just feed someone and go, here you go, have a fish and off you go. That's not going to help them get that fish tomorrow. But if you teach them how to fish, then you're right. So think about understanding the what and the why, because then that helps you the next time you have that question or a related question. You'll know what to do. It becomes a bit more intuitive. So I just, wanted to put that in there. Jess, did you have any final remarks?
Yeah, final remarks is, really key steps. I think, you know, make it easy for people to use and help your stakeholders and stallholders as well. We've tried to provide the resources to really help you progress that. But waste is one aspect of it. It's a very visible aspect of your event, and making those systems really easy supports that. But that's one part of sustainability, but it's a really important part of it.
Yeah, and it does make a big, big impact. So be the change that you want to see. I'm sure you've heard it before, but I mean, it's all down to us at the end of the day. Utilising that growth mindset, like I was saying, we were able to learn, like that's one of the really amazing things in life, and often challenges make us stronger. We've all just gone through COVID, hurrah, we survived. We're stronger from that, right? So sometimes growth is what we label as painful and some people label as negative, but it's really important for change, because without that, change doesn't happen. So I'd encourage you to have a growth mindset. Continue it bit by bit, because we'll all get there together, and we'll get there together stronger. So remember, look at the people around you. We're here together. You're not alone. We have community, and you can reach out and get that help that you need. So thank you very much for your engagement and for your interest in this. It's really great to see this getting some momentum, and there is some really great stuff happening in South Australia, so thank you. We hope you enjoyed this session. So feel free to use that QR to explore the resources. You don't have to digest them all today, but you know, you might remember later down the track, oh, there was that thing and I'm just going to quickly look it up and educate myself with my growth mindset. But stick around for the next session. We've got deep dive into divestment, and you might have heard at the first session, and the program designer here, B, she's sort of said that if you do one thing out of today, it's look at where your investments are. So that will be a really interesting session, but there's plenty happening on the stages today. So we hope you can engage with it and get a lot out of it. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Jess.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Yeah. And I'll be around a lot of the day, as well as a lot of green industry staff. And so please reach out and contact us if you need.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks.